Good morning, friend. Today is very interesting topic. Arab-Israel conflict. No one discuss why there is Palestine is involved, but we called Arab-Israel conflict. When the Israel was formed, who was responsible for that? If the Palestinian were fighting, why the Arab country were supporting? And there are so many questions will appear when we will going to discuss about Arab-Israel conflict. So if you see, the development in the formation of Israel, it started long dated back since 1917. Once the Jews movement were, started. So 1948, finally, the Israel was formed. But what was the reason why they chooses, the Palestinian land? Why, the Palestinian already they were, moved from the places Palestinian? There are so many questions will appear. If you see that, the British mandate, 1946, the almost all the area were having the full of Palestinian people only. The green area, you can see that this was the Palestinian, and the Jews were settled in this white small places only. But from the time to time, just within the 1 year, what was happened, lots of Israeli, the Jewish people were already landed on the Palestinian. You can see that Israel was not formed. Israel state was formed in the 1948, but the people were already moved to this place. In between 1949 to 1967, lots of people were already migrated, and this was the reason behind the 1916 war. And we can say that is 2010 or 2020, the Palestinian are very, in a small number. So let's discuss about the how this the Israeli state was formed. What was the reason behind Israel the conflict started? Let's see, the first we have to discuss about the origin of nationalism. Basically, what was happening, almost all the area were under the control of the Palestine was under the control of Ottoman Empire, and at the same time Arab nationalism was also going on. So the basically what was happened, the Palestinian leader in the Palestine, they want to they form their own state. They demanded their self determination, and that was the time the Turkish already was independent from the foreign rule. So by Kemal Ataturk. So the movement was again rise at the peak level in the Palestine. So if you see that, at the same time, what was happening, the nationalism was also going on in the different continent by the Theodore Haswell. What was he doing? He was organizing a movement that we call Zionism, means Jewish nationalist movement. And what was the demand for the Jews' homeland? It was already started. So what was happened? The Theodore already was the founder of Zionism. He encouraged all the Jews to move to the Palestine, and the purchase as much as land and be settled there. But what the reason was, is why the Palestinians were selling their land. So let me tell you, they were not aware about what is going on, and that was the time the Palestinian most of the land where is it's barren land, and the Jewish people were giving huge amount for the even barren land. The Palestinian were not understanding what was happening, why they are receiving lots of money from the Jewish people for this barren land. They were not aware about the one Jewish family will going to settle, they invited the other family member to be come, we have purchased the land. And what was that this was continue started. So you can see that that there are lots of settlement has been done under the Ottoman Empire only. So at the time of or we can say that before the worst World War One, lots of people they already settled. So that what was happened, if you see that Theodore, he was the was he's distributed pamphlet all over the that we call Judenstaat, and he became the basically in the 1897 he became the the world first president of the Zionist organization. So we cannot forget his contribution for the formation of Jewish state, because he created a movement to attract all the international actors toward the formation of Israeli state. So let's see what was happening during the World War I. During the World War I, there was the negotiation, or we can say that the communication was going on between the UK and the France. We know that the almost all world was the colonized by mainly the UK and the France. So that the what was the UK and the France both they made the communication to Hussein. The Hussein ibn Ali means the Emir of Makkah, the secretary of Makkah. You can see that this is the chief of Makkah basically, and the Sir Henry McMahon from the British High Commissioner. What they said that they decided the future of Palestinian without much regard to the wish of indigenous inhabitant, and they promised what they will the Palestinian will have their own independence. They can rule themselves, and entire communication was happened between the Hussein ibn Ali and the Sir Henry McMahon. So this the during the World War I event was there, but during the World War I, the agreement was happened that we called Sky-Picot Agreement, and the Sky-Picot was agreement was between the Britain and the France. These are the two were chief negotiator with the chief of the Mecca. The Sir Mark Skies from the Britain, and the Francis Jose Picot from the France. They negotiate and initiated the Sky-Picot Agreement. What was the Sky-Picot Agreement? The Sky-Picot Agreement, what the British already they made some commitment. What was the commitment? They will going to support Arab countries against the Ottoman in the war, and if the Arab country will going to support, then they will going to give the Palestinian or the recognitions. So they will have their own country. But what was happening in the Sky-Picot Agreement? The agreement divided the Turkish held Syria, even the Iraq, Lebanon, Palestinian into various French and British administrated area. You can see that all these were were divided into several parts, and this was the negotiation was done even the before the 1915 only. It was by the Sir Mark Skite and Francis George Picot, and this division led the another problem, because this Sir Sky Picot's agreement and led the another the declaration, and this this Balfour Declaration is one of the reason for the Arab-Israel conflict. And what was happening in the Balfour Declaration? British, they fully supported the Palestine for a nation home for the Jewish people. Means what was happened? The Palestine land was chosen for the Jewish people, and it was clearly mentioned by the Arthur James Balfour in the declaration. The person behind the Balfour Declaration was Arthur James Balfour. He was the foreign secretary, and to the Lionel Walter Rhodes, so leader of the Anglo-Jewish community. If you see that this Balfour Declaration was contradictory to the Sky-Picot Agreement, what they have promised to the Emir of Makkah. But what was happened? The settlement already started. The reason behind they choosing the Balfour Declaration, the Jewish homeland in the Palestinian, they want to control the Suez Canal. If the Israel will be there, they can easily handle the Suez Canal. So this was the reason behind the Balfour Declaration was there, and even how they will going to create the Israeli homeland. So they formed the British mandate was came to the fore, and it was is created, or we can say that approved by the League of Nations, July 24, 1922, and United Kingdom became the first country to that endorsed the establishment of Palestinian as a nation home for Jewish people, and it was confirmed by the British mandate in 1922. So what was happened? In the 1931, so many changes was happened. After this, the homeland already, is accepted by the British mandate, they promise the Palestinian, the not only all the Jewish people will be going to settle. There will be limited number of Jewish people will going to come in the Palestinian land, the 75,000. And if more immigrant will come, they need the consent from the Palestinian Arab. But all this commitment was not happen, and this was the reason behind Arab Israel conflict. So you can say that this was the the Balfour Declaration, that Zionists condemned a new policy accusing Britain of favoring the Arabs. All the Jews, they were against. Why only 75,000? But they were not aware, that was the only, on the paper, that is white paper. The Second World War started. And, the Second World War, changed the, respect in the Jews community all over the world. Basically, what was happened? If we see from the Germany point of view, the in the 1933 Jews agency, Nazis negotiated the Havara agreement, the transfer agreement. The most of the large number of people were settled, Jews were settled in the Germany only. So they negotiated, they were going to the Palestine. But what was happened? The Nazis, they prevented. If you want to go, you can go, but you are not allowed to take all the monies and the property whatever you have. You can take some money that is a requirement for to pay the taxes, and that is only. And it was the what was happened, these all the anti-Semitism policy of Nazi, means Hitler, against the Jews, rise the the Jewish movement against the Hitler in the Germany. But what was the fascist regimes were emerging across the Europe, the Germany was very much powerful, the capturing so many land, and they started the Jews execution. So in many countries, 1935 German Nuremberg laws, the Jews reverted to being non-citizen. They were deprived of all the rights, and then the persecution was started. So you can see that the Hitler anti-Semitism policies created a huge massacre in many places, and that created a enormous pressure on the world actor, that we can say that UK and the France. The Hitler itself is killed, or we can say that murdered 6 million Jews in the Holocaust. He raised almost all the people against the Jews. So wherever the Jewish people were they found, they will be killed. Lots of migration was started, the people were migrating, and they were going to the Palestinian land. So Jews' arrival was started in in the full pace. In the You can see that the British mandate was in 1922, is said 25,000. But if you see that between 1929 to 1938, 250,000 Jews were arrived in the Palestinian. 174,000 arrived between 1933 and 1936. And this was the reason, the Arab country, they found that whatever the British has promised through the Sykes-Picot agreement, or in the Balfour Declaration, was only on the paper, or it's not in the reality. And this was the time the Arab started their revolt against the British, or we can say that the Jews in the Palestine. The exclusion, you can see that the global Jewish population, that here was you can see that 166,000 is there, and immediately this dropped out in the 1920. You just imagine how much massacre was happening. So the Palestinian, under the mandate system, they started the revolt, and now the Arab Israel revolt started. It was the where we can say that the Arab Israel conflict began. In the earlier phase, it was revolt. How it became the conflict? What was the reason behind the Arab were supporting the Palestinian? There are so many questions will comes in your mind, and of course we're going to discuss every single question why even the this Palestinian new land were chosen by the British only. So first see that the Arab Revolt began in the 1929 and it's continued in the high pace only. So that started in response to the British put limits the Jewish immigration. Once the revolt was started, some limitation was done, but again it's moving. So let's see that what was happened. The United Nation was formed, and the division already all the most of the country they got independence. You can see that after the 1405, there are most of the countries where got independence. You can see that the Syria near about Israel we are just discussing. The Syria, you can Jordan. You can see that these are the some of the already the country where having in after the 1945 only. The major problem is happened once the Israel state was formed in 1948. No one was expecting that will be recognized, but it was recognized by the US, UK. Why the Jewish land was created? Why the US is involved so much? Why? What was the reason behind the UK and France both all they supported? So there are so many questions will comes in your mind. So you can see that the next is about the Arab Israel conflict, what was happening in the 1945, what was the contribution of the Egypt, the Gamal Abdel Nasser, and the 6 Day War, even the after the what was the the how it's impacted 1961, and we can see that also the basically the 1973 Yom Kippur War, and the Israel the Camp David Accord, and the Palestinian versus Israel, all the Intifada, the role of PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, and Oslo Accord, and Israeli settlement, and the right now what is conflict. So these all will going to discuss in the next class. So please be there, and until unless please subscribe my channel for the next update. I am coming with another Arab Israel part 2 in the next lecture by tomorrow. Thank you so much dear all of you. Take care, and please like subscribe my channel. Thank you.